Welcome to episode 168 of Meeple to Meeple. If you love clear wordplay mixed with a bit of dungeon crawling chaos, then I recommend you check out Word Dungeon on Kickstarter now. Word Dungeon is a solo puzzle game where you explore hand-drawn dungeons by creating interconnected words. But words aren't just words. They're your weapons, they're your strategy, and sometimes they're your only way out alive. It's a game that challenges how you think, it pushes your creativity, and it even adds a playful twist to the classic dungeon crawling formula. Today, I've got Joe Shimwell joining me to talk about where the idea came from, how the game evolved during development, what it's like bringing a project like this to life. We'll explore some of the unexpected moments from playtesting, the kind of words that turn into game-winning moves, and those sparks of creativity that make a game feel alive around the table. And if we're lucky, Joe might even tell us what his favorite word in the English language is. Joe, thanks for joining. How are you?
I'm really good, PJ. Thank you for having me on. And now all I'm doing is trying to think of what my favorite word. I've got it. I know what it is.
Well, okay, so what is your favorite word in the English language?
Okay, I have two. I love the word cloudburst. I think there's
Okay,
something just lovely about the word cloudburst.
cloudburst.
It's just really nice. I think it's the "but" in the second part of it is nice. And zephyr, a light breeze, a zephyr is a, and just because it's got really cool letters in.
That's
In
a
fact,
good word.
if I could play a word dungeon now and stick zephyr in there, that would make me very happy to get that word.
So for those of you, if you back it and get Word Dungeon, Zephyr, try to fit it in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Well, so Joe, let me ask you this to start. What was the first game you ever played as a kid, if you remember?
It's going to be Monopoly, would be my guess. It would be my guess there. I think. Oh well, no, we played a lot of whist, a lot of whist, a lot of
Okay.
card games as a kid. We'd go on holiday with my mum and dad and my sister, and kind of the card games would come out, and they would be fairly standard. So some rummy, some whist. Like kind of playing 20, 30 games of a night, just playing it through.
Yeah.
And then a bit of Monopoly on the holidays, but not by anybody's choice, I suppose, just because that's the thing that you played back in the early to late 90s if you wanted a board game. I do remember kind of early on, my dad tried to invent a game, and I can't remember very much about it other than he'd made this polystyrene mountain, like out of styrofoam, and we had
Yeah.
miniatures that went up and down it. And I think he wrote a letter to like Waddington's, the board game company, this kind of the late 90s, and probably got a very, very apology back saying, I don't know what you've made here. This is not a game. I don't remember very much about it other than he put a lot of effort into something I just didn't really understand at the time. Yeah, and so just a lot of card games.
Sure. Sure. So what was the first game that got you into the modern gaming hobby?
So must be about 12 years ago now, played a lot of Catan over a summer, a shed load. My sister lives out in Germany and her partner is German. They are big fans of Catan, and we went over there for 3 or 4 weeks in the summer and just played and played and played and played and played and really enjoyed it because it's different. It's the gateway game, and there's a reason
Yeah.
why it's got that
Yes.
reputation, right? Because it shows you this kind of new world of what's possible in games. But then I think after that, I put games down for a while. There's a lot of things I do in my life that I would consider kind of playful. I work on summer camps, a bit like Camp America style things, which is all about designing kind of playful experiences for young children and big games that play across an evening, but not so much board games. And then I think I must have come back a few years later and had a big run on Pandemic over a summer. So maybe I burnt through a few. Yeah, burnt through a few over a couple of years. In fact, I was just been sorting some board games out earlier and I found that copy of Pandemic. And just remember loving that as well. But this is something you can do with games. This cardboard on your table can do this other wonderful thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Like it's just it was like Monopoly, Catan, Pandemic. Like
Yeah,
it's interesting. I talk about all the time, and the tagline for the podcast has been since the beginning, uniting players around the world. And I really feel like the podcast doesn't do the uniting, but that's the uniting is the journey, right? It's Catan, Monopoly, Catan, Pandemic seems to be, although there's a little divergence from people, but yeah, like that's the common journey to this hobby, right?
yeah, totally.
So how about this? Do you have a favorite player color that you like to play when you're at the table?
No, I'm the guy who takes the last one. I think there's something I think I'm a bit weird with games. Like I love playing games. And there's sort of no games that are off limits. Like if someone says, "Do you want to play a game of this?" I don't even ask what the thing is we're going to play. The answer is yes. For me, part of the whole hobby is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all what's on front of me on the table. It's the fact that I've got a shared space with a group of friends, maybe friends that I've never met before, right? They're new people you're playing with. And the game is going to bring me for an hour or so into a place where I can just enjoy myself and relax with a group of other people and play the game, have conversations about life, the universe, and everything, right? And so player color doesn't matter to me. It's a long time since I've cared about winning or losing. Like really, it doesn't matter at all. And some of the heavier games which I struggle with, I think mentally to get my head around, I just enjoy being there for the ride. I think sometimes just it's just nice to play, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
nice to get out and play a game.
Yeah, absolutely. So you go through all this journey, and this takes you to developing and designing your first game. I guess this is your first game, right?
So this is the first game that I've taken to publication, and just to kind of rewind slightly, the first Word Dungeon campaign is finished on Kickstarter. There's another one coming up actually on BackerKit, and I'll explain the difference between the
Okay.
two. So it's not quite the same thing.
So tell us how did you come to the idea of putting this dungeon crawling and word games together?
Yeah.
What was your inspiration?
So I live in Whitley Bay in the northeast of England, and just up the road from me now, there is a board games cafe that opened up 2.5, 3 years ago now called Bay Games. And I, on a kind of whim, went in there, started talking to people, and met some other people who are playing games, but also designing games as well. And then several ideas later, and none of these are the Word Dungeon ideas, I'm part of different playtest groups, and I'm going every Friday and playing games and testing games out. And it's been a real place for community for me, a real place to go and meet people and be friends with people and design and play games that I've made. And so a few have kind of been in the works over the last kind of 2.5 years. Some have been played with and tested and then put on the shelf because they weren't ready. Some then get back off the shelf and they come out of the box every now and again and I try it. I've got an interesting one it's on the floor down there about pickpocketing in kind of Fagin's London, a Dickensian theme, which kind of spent a long time on the shelf and has just come back up recently. Every time I'm designing and making these, it's about being with other people and exploring and playing with these ideas and how can we be playful and how can I create moments that help people be playful as well and enjoy themselves. That's kind of the real drive for me behind it. Playing is fun, but can I make things that make other people have fun as well? And those could be board games, and a lot of my work now is board games, but they could be any kind of experience that kind of bring people together and get them smiling and laughing and joking. And that's
Right.
kind of really what's driven me in terms of design. Now, for Word Dungeon, and it's a lovely game. I really enjoy it, although I would say I've now written so many words on so many pieces of paper. It's nice to take a break every now and again and not do a dungeon. It's one of those ones, so I can tell you, for all the other games, I can tell you the inspiration. The pickpocketed one, I think I must have watched Oliver the Music over Christmas. I've
Okay.
got one that I've been working on for a while about dropping humanitarian aid, and that's because there's a really cool YouTube video I saw about how humanitarian aid is dropped, right? And this one was Saturday morning last June, and I woke up and I remember it vividly. I woke up and I was like, "What if you did Scrabble, but you did it in a dungeon?" And that was it. The two were like I hadn't dreamt the game. Just it just came as I woke up. It's like, what if I put those things two things together? And I jumped out of bed, went downstairs, and because when you do those things together, it's actually fairly straightforward. I just need a grid, and then I can start working out if it works. And version number one was a playable game. That doesn't happen very often, right? In this world of
Right.
game design,
Right.
playable one, iteration one should be awful. But because there's a simplicity to what I was putting together that I hadn't tried to overcomplicate it. Just what happens if I put the things together? Oh, this is a game that works really nicely and is really interesting in it, and is for me a different take on many of the word games that you've got that I feel and talking to kind of players of it is it feels a bit grandiose, but it's quite an empowering word game. So a lot of word games, you have a bunch of tiles, and the game is all about, often 1v1, who's the cleverest with words, right? That is
Sure.
the
Sure.
underpinning of a lot of games. Who is the cleverest at words? Who's the best at words? Because this one is a solo game, and because this one just relies on your vocabulary, there is no set of tiles that you're going to play from here. This is just, can you find the next word that fits? And what's cool about that is sometimes you can put you can stick Zephyr or Cloudburst in, right? You can put those words that you quite like in, or you just put the word "and" in because it gets you around the corner out of a room that you need to get out of.
Sure.
And you can kind of push yourself and be really clever with your words, or actually you can just think about what gets you through the dungeon. And that's kind of what fell out of my head. And then, of course, a lot of iteration kind of moves on from that. The thing that I create was a very blocky thing, and I spent last summer learning how to draw dungeons because it was important to me that I was able to bring that artwork in and see if I could do it. And I remember as a kid, I used to doodle little, what do we doodle? We doodled kind of mazes and dungeons as kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so actually some of it came back to me and I was like, oh, actually drawing these things is really therapeutic as well. Like I can make the game and I can also draw the game as well, which is really nice. And then just play test with lots of different people and iterating on the ideas and starting to build a community around it, which I think I didn't understand at first. People say you need to build a community around your game, and I was like, how do you do that? Oh,
Yeah.
actually, you need to find the game, and then if you can find a game that's compelling enough, then the community start to form around it. It's not huge; we haven't got thousands of people playing, but we've got a real core group of people who just love it, and it's really nice to be creating something that I can just look and see people really enjoying. In fact, there's a story from just before Christmas which made me incredibly happy. So the new campaign is about these little dungeons, so smaller
Yeah.
versions of the bigger one, and
Okay.
it's
Okay.
a booklet of 100 of them, little kind of I suppose like break kind of puzzles, things you could do on your commute in. And before Christmas, I did kind of 30 of them in a row each day, like a winter challenge. It was really nice. Group of people on Instagram playing the game, sharing it, and then this teacher from France messaged me and sent me a picture. And there's a room in this picture with like 60 students, 60 of his French students doing an English class in France, and they've all got my game in front of them. Because of course, this isn't about tiles. This is just about using the English language or any language to
Yeah.
build words. And he was like, I've just played this with 45 kids this morning, another 45 kids this afternoon, and they're absolutely loving it. And this was kind of pre-Kickstarter, and it did surprisingly well at that. But it was just lovely to have this kind of, as people out there playing the thing that I've made, and I made it for people to play and make them happy. And I mean, it was in a French lesson, so I don't know how happy the young people were, but you get my point.
Well, yeah. But I'm sure of the 90 kids that day, they all learned something new about the English language that maybe they didn't expect. That's also an interesting way of learning a language. As someone who has studied many foreign languages, I've never had anyone implement games of any kind. So that sounds really interesting and a great way to learn a language. Yeah.
It's just lovely, and I think it because as I was saying before that you can play Cloudburst or you can play the word "and," right? So
Right.
you can be an expert in a language, or you can just have 15, 20, or 40, however many words you've got of it, and you can still play through and still work out how this puzzle works. The new version, so that the single dungeons are, I suppose, much more puzzly. They're about 5 to 10 minutes, and you're working your way through several different constraints that are in a particular room, trying to maximize your points as you leave. But that kind of the basic of it is I suppose Scrabble like.
Right.
A word goes down, a set of letters go down, and the next set of letters must form a word that connects to the puzzle in there. But you
Yeah.
end up with, because you've then got the structure of the dungeon around it, not everything goes anymore. So you have to fit it around corners. You have to work your way. And for me, it's very much like you're traveling through that dungeon, that exploring, which is why it became a dungeon crawler quite quickly. Because yeah, we can move, but we can use a path of words to move through.
So you had said this is a solo game. So are you scoring points or is it just trying to get through the dungeon? And how replayable is it?
So that's a good question. So initially, not very replayable. It took me a while to work out kind of what mechanics needed to go in order to give it that sense of I'll do it again and again and again. So for any given map, so for example, the first word dungeon map, the map is fixed, but you choose the monsters you're going to fight in it. So there's a list of different monsters you can fight, and those monsters have difficulty. And as you're playing, every time you play a word, you're crossing off letters from the monster's name, kind of left to right. So there's replayability in that you can throw down a more difficult set of monsters. Go through the same dungeon, but this time you play against Dracula, or you play against, I suppose, whoever you want if you wanted to add your own in. But we've got a list that you can play against the 6-point monsters, the really hard ones, like your Jabberwocky and your Hippogriff, your really long, complicated ones. Each of the dungeons also often has variants. So as you go through, you can pick up treasure chests, and they already have letters in them. So you can print off a different version of the dungeon that has a different set of letters. But then we've kind of got, I'm up to now about the 6, 7, maybe 10 different variants of the whole theme. I've got one that I played a bit recently where you're actually just traveling around a duck pond. So there's no dungeon in sight. You're just idly moving around a duck pond trying to make loops with your words, which is quite cool.
Who doesn't like walking around a duck pond, right?
Yeah, totally. And my favorite is one that's set in a zoo, and you're trying to maximize the number of zoo animals you can write down. But then as you play the zoo animals, if you write them over these little squares that have a camera on it, your animal takes a photo of all the other animals that are in there, and you score for every animal. But then you get these really cool moments when you're like, oh, my badger that I've just written down has just taken a photograph of an elephant and a kangaroo, which is just ridiculous because they haven't, right? But it's just this, I think, something whimsical about that kind of the words that you're playing. You can have these little moments just in your own head, right? Because you're playing it solo. You've got this kind of moment, just done this really cool thing. And it's nice for me because sometimes people will message me and say, I've just done this, and I've just played this word, and I'm really happy with this word that I've played. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want. I want you happy.
So what's your inspiration for the different types of dungeons?
So yeah. So there's a couple that have been inspired by just conversations with people who played the original game and said, have you thought about kind of this mechanic and throwing it in? One of them is a race out of a Minotaur's labyrinth, and you're rolling a dice, and as you roll the dice, it chops off the letters on your path. So your path is kind of disappearing behind you as you go. Yeah. And you're deciding how much treasure you think you can collect, or whether you need to make a swift exit. And it's kind of a bit touch and go. And then, and that was kind of inspired by Board Game Duck off Instagram, who runs the UK review circle. She's a real fan of the game, and she was like, "Oh, what if you did it like this?" I was like, "Yeah, I can take that. I'll see and work out what that looks like." And then sometimes it'll be just wandering down the street, and you go, "Oh, yeah, that would go. Let's try that." And then the first iteration of the drawing is just done kind of maybe on grid of paper, right? Before it needs to look fancy. I've got one coming up that's about someone asked the question, like, when I barge through a door in the dungeon, in your dungeons, you can see what's on the other side. How do we make it so that you can't see what's on the other side? So you barge through a door with a word, and then you roll a dice, and you end up dropping some polyominoes in the space. So you don't actually know what the physical space looks like until you've dropped these random shapes in it. But yeah, and I think I just like trying new things out, right? And some of them stick and some of them don't. And some of them, I think what happens is most often everything sort of works. Some of them are just incredibly hard.
Sure.
It can get very difficult. And so balancing it all, I'll send a dungeon to someone and they'll be like, this is very difficult. And like, yeah, I think it is very difficult, isn't it? All right, well, maybe scale that one back a little bit.
Do you have your game is crowdfunded, but what about crowdsourcing dungeons? Like, is there a way, like I say, I got a great idea and I really want to do this, so I'm an archivist, right? In my day job.
Okay, cool.
So what if I wanted to do it in an archives where you're going up and down the stacks with all these records on the shelves? Like, is there a way for me to just make that, or anything of that?
I'll make it for you, PJ. We'll have it done by the end of the week. So that is a really good question. I think because I don't believe the format's completely new. I've not seen it anywhere, but I can't believe it's completely new. But it's just because the base of it is very straightforward. putting these other bits onto it, these blocks onto it, is actually fairly easy because you can test it. You can move it into a place where you're trying something out. For the campaign that's coming up on BackerKit, if I can just plug it, May 8th.
Yeah.
Or
May
7th.
8th. Or 7th.
Yeah. Yeah, one of those. Yeah. By the time this podcast airs, actually, I'll have launched what I'm calling the community crypts. So the crowdfunder is for 100 dungeons, right? And I've drawn about 50 up to now, and over the next couple of weeks, I'll get the next 50 out, and they'll be in a book form. And then alongside that, there's something called this community crypt. So anybody who sends me a sketch, right, of their dungeon that they think works, and I've got some kind of details on how you can draw it up. You put that sketch, you email it to me, and then at some point after the campaign, I'll have compiled all the community sketches together, and I'll have drawn them up, and then taken those drawings, and there'll be a second part to the campaign, right? There'll be the crowdfunded thing that you kind of went and you bought, and then if you've backed, you get this other thing as well, which is basically just anybody who wanted to submit a game. Now, as I say this to you, I'm slightly nervous that there's a limit to how many I can draw, and if it gets, maybe I'll stagger the delivery of them, right? Because 20 of them, cool. If we get up to 100, okay, I can do 100. It might just take me a while to get them all drawn out. But yeah, so bringing community on and finding ways that people can share their ideas and push that through is exciting. Really exciting. And we can have an archivist.
Yeah. So you started on Kickstarter. Now you got on BackerKit. How have those experiences with those two different platforms, how have they been? How different are they? Do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference yet. And my long-term plan is to do the next campaign, which will be for the bigger dungeons again, will probably be on GameFound, because I want to experience all three. And I think my challenge as a designer talking to other designers about using these different platforms is you can find the champion of every one of them. Someone will tell you everyone is the best one. And so I find it quite difficult to make that decision based, well, if everybody thinks everyone's the best one, how can anyone be the best one?
Right.
And you'll hear discussions about, well, you need to use this one for this thing, or this thing would be the best at this thing. But for me, I'm lucky that I can just I'm just going to explore it. I'm going to do all three, and then I will come away from all three with an objective kind of decision on what I use next. And that might be using multiple, because this one is good for this one, this one's good for that. But finding out myself is kind of quite important. Now, that's not me kind of going, I'm not listening to anybody. It's me going, well, everybody's saying everything is the best. I think there's a lot of advice and guidance you get about how to use the platform. A lot of it is really out of date, which is a challenge for anybody using them. Things like some of Kickstarter's help documents are from more than 10 years ago, right? And that's not good information. BackerKit's interesting. It supports me a lot more in the pre-launch bit. I get a lot more information about what's working and what isn't working in terms of where I'm promoting things in the pre-launch. And you don't get any of that in Kickstarter. So you've got a pre-launch, but you can't see where people are coming in from. So BackerKit's really interesting in that point of view. But BackerKit's also really confusing. Now, there'll be people listening now and thinking, no, it's not. It's not confusing at all. It is for this guy. Maybe this guy's an idiot, but it definitely is. And then I look forward to trying the next one. BackerKit's also got their Pockettopia thing going on. So they have a group of games creators who are all creating at the same time. So I'm interested to see how that plays into it.
Sure.
I mean, Kickstarter has Micro May as well, but this is the Pockettopia one for BackerKit that I'll be part of in May.
So does this mean that once you have experienced all three of them, you will be hosting a panel at UKGE on which one you recommend, and do a comparison side by side?
Totally. Or I think you reach enlightenment, maybe just that's it. You end up glowing, and I don't know. To be honest, I think even after doing each one once, I think there's probably still a lot more to be learned about each one.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I think I'm lucky that I spend my time with a lot of other designers. It turns out that this little town of Whitley Bay in the northeast of England Newcastle itself has lots of designers, games designers floating around. And what's lovely about the community is everybody's so free with advice and so free to share their experiences and to give you advice and guidance and support on kind of what to do and what to try. It's the marketing bit that scares me the most, though. I don't know if it's a UK based thing, but the idea of the kind of talking about your product and kind of bigging your product up, that doesn't feel like me. And I've had to
Right.
learn how to do that a little bit over these last. Hopefully, I've just done a decent job at sharing the game with you then.
I think you've done a fantastic job, which segues nicely into my question about vulnerability. It's one I ask of all my designers.
Okay.
Walk me through the challenges you had personally as a designer in being vulnerable and putting your work out there for playtesting. Like, what was it like? It sounds like maybe it was a little challenging at first for you, but talk to me about that for a minute.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So my background is in teaching. So I was teaching little kids for the first 10 years of my career. And so constant feedback is something that I have been comfortable with for most of my working life.
Okay.
But that becomes a little bit different when you are creating this thing that I think I would call art. I think the creation of a board game beyond the art is still art form.
Yes.
And I think that's an interesting discussion in itself, but I think the whole thing is an art form, right? And suddenly you're at this point where you have created a piece of art, a board game, but I think we'll call it a piece of art here, and you're about to offer it up for critique. And that is hard. That is hard for everybody. And you sit in kind of the playtesting circles, and particularly when you kind of new first time designers come along, and you can see that it's just hurting everything you're saying to
Hmm.
them, which is just about in the pursuit of a better game. Because
Sure.
everybody, I don't know if you've been to any of the kind of playtest meets, it is all in pursuit of a better game, supporting. But yeah, it can feel pretty damning when you kind of like you just with the first game that was all about the sky. It's called Sky Relief, the dropping of humanitarian aid. I took that the first playtesting I went to. I took that to the playtest UK group in Newcastle, and they just chopped it to bits. Right, and you're like, oh, for hours into this, and the answer is that I should have been there sooner. You need to be testing things before you've made it all fancy, before you've created your work of art.
Right.
You need to take your things that are little broken ideas that aren't quite there yet and start talking about those broken ideas. Because otherwise, you'll take something in, you'll offer it up, and because it's playtesting, people will poke it and they'll say, "Well, that's this bit for." I take that bit. Oh, I don't like this bit, and people will tell you they don't like it. Playtesting with
Hmm.
the public's interesting as well, because I wrote a blog a couple of years ago about playtesting with the public and how it's a really interesting space where when you playtest with a public group, you empower them to talk about games in a different way
Yes.
and to
Yes.
become a critique of games. And that's really nice because for some people that's really important. It's a platform they don't normally get. And so yeah, public playtesting is they'll tell you it's rubbish if it's rubbish. And also my kids upstairs they'll tell me it's rubbish if it's
They'll probably tell you it's rubbish even if it's not, because
yeah.
can they be objective? Maybe. So, what is the, I guess, okay, what's the one piece of advice you have for someone who's playtesting your game that would be helpful for you as the designer?
That's okay. That's a good question. And I think it's a hard question. So I know what it is, the advice, because I don't know if you ever get quite the truth back. You want them to be honest with you about what they're playing. And that's really hard because there must be some like PhD thesis on it, right? Of the
Right.
interaction between a designer and the player of a game in a social situation where they're sat in front of each other. And so there's a load of social norms about how you talk to people. As a designer, I'm trying to empower you to give me feedback on the game, but I'm a human sat next to another human. And that's sometimes quite hard. Right? And some people are fine. Some people will cut you down, no problem at all. But it would be honest, but I don't know if that is good enough. I don't think that cuts it enough
Right.
because you can't. There's a social thing that's going on that means that kind of if you want to be honest and that gets very blunt as well, it's just that awkward thing, right? Where you end up
Right.
as a playtester, you could, if you want, just cut someone's game down to pieces, but you can tell that game is part of them.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of separating yourself from the game, I think is quite tricky as well.
Yeah. I So my wife and I are very active playtesters. We go to playtesting groups and we playtest a lot of games. It's just one of our favorites. I love prototypes. You know, if you just got a sheet of paper that's handwritten and there's no board yet, we're in love. I have it's a notebook. I take notes throughout the course of the game because there's different levels of feedback, right? First of all, there's an emotional level. How does this game make me feel after playing it? And I think that there's some value to communicating that to you as a designer.
Yeah, yeah.
Second of all, mechanically, how did the game play, right?
Hmm.
And so I try to jot down constructive criticism to help you make your game better. My wife does the same thing with the rule books. She just is amazing with rule books. We once had, if you'll allow me, there was a moment we were at a playtesting event down in St. Louis, and we sat down with the game designer, and he handed the rule book to my wife. He goes, I'm just going to sit here quietly, read my rule book, and then you explain the game to me and tell me because I really need help with the rule book. I almost wish more designers in that playtest setting would do that more because that's the experience we all have. Brand new game
Yeah.
arrives. We read the rule book and then you got to teach it to, well, my wife ends up teaching it to me because I don't read rule books. But that was a really great experience. And so, you know, yeah, you could pick up on when a designer is married to their project and
Hmm.
doesn't take
Yeah, yeah.
criticism very well. I've
Hmm.
experienced that. And I'm like, okay, they're being overly sensitive and I'm trying, if I'm being a little too assertive, aggressive, whatever, or I'm not reading the room as it were, she'll do a really good job of reining me in if necessary. Or I look to her for cues like, is he getting this or am I being too much, whatnot. It's a great experience, and you're right. I'm sure there's a bunch of academics who've written about that
Yeah.
dynamic. And if they hadn't, if I were in grad school, I would write about it.
Yeah. I think the other thing you don't know as a playtester is you don't know the backstory. You don't. A game comes to you and it's presented to you, and you don't really know the blood, sweat, and tears that's gone on behind us. Like, is there 20,000 hours? That's too many, but you know what I mean. Behind there, that is there also thousands of pounds already spent on this, that, or the other? That means that some of the suggestions you're giving, that designer just can't really compute those suggestions because those suggestions also involve breaking so much other stuff that has been invested. And that's hard because as a playtester, you don't know. And it's not your job to know either. Like it's not your job to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had an experience once at Gen Con. There's this first exposure playtest hall where it's like from 8 a.m. until midnight. There's just these 2-hour playtest sessions where there's like 30 or 40 games being playtested. This is a really great experience, both as a playtester and a designer. Uh, so if you ever do make it to America, you should look at that. If you've got a prototype game, it's a great way to get feedback. But we were playtesting a game, and the game seemed really problematic.
Okay.
And it was there was a total of four of us because it was a 2 to 4 player game. So it was myself and my wife and two other people that we didn't know. And at one point the designer got up, he excused himself for a minute, and we had this conversation. Like, this game's just terrible,
Hmm.
but the cards and the art was beautiful. So we were debating like there's all these problems in the game, but the game itself was gorgeous. It looked like a final draft, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when the designer came back, we asked and we found out that this was his first draft. To your point, as
Mhm.
playtesters, we
Yeah.
don't know, but he invested so much into the artwork on the front end, it looked like a final product. This was his first time exposing it to playtesting. So that really helped us provide better feedback because
Yeah.
then we
Yeah.
knew, right? Context is everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um,
for designers, it goes back to you get testing things faster. I think there's playtest groups all over the world, right? And we have them up
mhm,
and down. We have Playtest UK up and down in most. I think most big cities in England, and finding that is kind of a difficult but more safe space, because you're going there. The whole premise is we're going there to play new things and play things that are really rough. You don't rock up with your pretty thing. You rock up with the broken thing, and you break it a little bit more before you fix it again. And finding those groups and finding those people who are able to understand where you're coming from and kind of temper that criticism or deliver that in such a way that it's really helpful for you. It's in pursuit of the better game.
Yeah.
It's good.
You
It's
had
important.
talked about the design, the community of designers around where you are. First of all, I didn't know that Newcastle was like kind of this booming, area of game designers in the UK, which is good to know. I'm gonna have to spend some time there next time I'm in England.
Yeah, we've got we've got a playtest group that meets. Well, in Whitley Bay, we've got about three of us that kind of meet regularly. Every Friday, we're down in the games cafe playing and testing stuff, and then the Playtest UK group is meeting in Newcastle kind of twice a month now, with sometimes 5 people, sometimes 17 people. Once was our biggest one. Some people who are kind of old hands at it have made lots of games. So Jackson Pope from Eurodice Game, I don't know if you know Flick Fleet. He's from the northeast of England, and he comes to that
Okay.
play session. And then loads of other people kind of in that mix coming along, offering their advice and guidance, and it's just a nice group to be part of. And it's just fun, right? You're playing games.
Yeah.
It's just another way of playing games.
It is an interesting phenomenon because at the end of the day, you are competitors, right? And yet the same message I hear all the time is how welcoming and helpful the design
Yeah.
community is,
I'm not sure how much of competitors we are.
Yeah.
I think particularly for indies, we're all floating around trying our best to get seen. But there's so many games out there, and there's so many ways to get published. I saw something recently on Instagram. Someone had posted about, are we at peak board game? I think was the premise of the post. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I really don't. It's
Yeah.
you might be fed up of seeing board games, but actually, I think the world just wants more games, and they just keep coming and coming and coming. So I think as long as a designer, you can work out what you're trying to achieve with your game. Where do you want it to go? Do you want to self-publish it, or do you want to find a publisher to publish your game? There's lots of different ways you can do this. Or you just want to make 100 copies and go to your local market and sell them, right? That's also a total legit way of making games. And once you kind of know what you want to achieve from it, then you just point yourself in that direction and kind of learn what you can about it and start putting your work in front of people. But I don't think I see that competition. And I might be wrong. I might be missing it, or I might be blind to it. Maybe it's there and I'm just trying to put some blinkers on around it. But it really doesn't feel like you're battling against each other.
Yeah. That seems to be the story that I hear when I talk to designers. They all just talk about we're competitors, but we're really not. So everything you just said, that's the same story.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the decision to self-publish versus, like you said, going with a publisher. Why self-publish and not?
Possibly a little stubborn, I think might be the answer.
That's an honest answer right there.
Yeah, I think that, so particularly for the genre of game that I'm working in, so I'm looking at print and play games specifically at the moment. The pickpocket one that I mentioned would be one that I would take to a publisher because it's a physical game. But this feels like something that I should be able to do in-house. This should be something I can do. But also for me, if I give it to someone else, if I pitch it to someone else and someone takes it off me, I stop learning from it. Right? And if someone takes it from me and they can give me a nice little royalty check from it every 6 months or whatever you get. But the second that I hand it over, it's no longer mine. And I think for this particular game, there's so much more I can learn from it and so much more it can tell me about how this works and how game design works and how games make people happy, and so much more of my own ideas that I can pour into it, that to hand it over now would be too soon.
Sure.
Maybe some point in the future, great. Someone else can have it when I've got something else that I can pour my creativity into. But at the moment, this is a space where I can just drop so much of my energy and really just enjoy playing with new ideas. To hand it off, to get someone else to publish it, not my bag. The fact is, a print and play helps. I think print and play is a genre that should have so many more eyes on it than it does. I think it is seen as sometimes seen as the kind of the lesser of the physical box that you've got, right? But actually, when you look at some of these print and play games that are coming out, these are just beautiful games,
Yeah.
incredibly well put together, really interesting. You just have to print it yourself. And I hope that through kind of things that I'm doing in print and play, I'm trying to bring more audience into that to say, right, yeah, you've got the cool things on your shelf and they are really cool. They're absolutely beautiful. But there's some really cool stuff out there that's print and play as well.
So, one last question about the design community, the community of designers. Is there anything to your mind that maybe they need to work on? A criticism of the community, as you were?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because we've talked about how great they are and how
Yeah,
welcoming,
yeah.
but you can always be better. So anything you notice, you're like, yeah, guys, let's do
I
this.
think there's something about onboarding that I think
Okay.
could be better. But I don't know, and of course, my experience is narrow. There's just the people that I've spent time with. I'm actually part of an Instagram community called Board Game Prototype, which is about bringing together indie designers in the same
Yep.
Instagram chat group mainly, but to talk about kind of design. And part of what we're doing there is about how do we bring in new designers in a way that is safe, that brings them in, that supports them, and allows them to develop as designers. I don't know how you do it differently though, because you can't find the people who are making games that are doing it quietly behind the scenes. You can't. They're
Sure.
hard to find, right? Because they're just at home building games.
Right.
In fact, a good friend of mine, he's a teacher. He comes to our playtest session, and for I don't know, maybe a decade, he's been kind of just making games in his spare room of an evening. And then one day he kind of decides, right, I'm going to bring this game and I'm going to show it to some people. You can't really find them until they come in. I suppose we can make
Yeah.
open spaces, but those do exist. If you Google games design communities, you can find them. So I don't think I have. It's really tricky. I don't think I have a strong answer. I think the answer is probably yes. There's things that we could do better, but also that it's complicated. And the other part is that this is for the majority, particularly with indies. This is their part time, right? This is their evening work. This is their passion project. And so yeah, because they well, you need to build this structure or this structure, but then who's going to build that? When's the time exist to build that?
Yeah. I mean, those are all fair points. I agree with you that onboarding is an area where there's room for improvement, right? But again, there's a lot of challenges that go along with that
Yeah.
to everything you just said. So,
But just as a point, I think a thing that we see quite often, I think in the community I'm part of, is you'll watch someone new come in, and they normally find us about 5 minutes before they're about to launch their Kickstarter. That's when they'll come in, and you're like, oh, "Okay, brilliant! You've got this really cool game," and you go onto their Kickstarter, and you've got, "Oh, we've got 50 followers here. Right, we've got a problem to start with." But what we don't have is a good way of supporting designers
yeah.
because of the same things we've just been talking about with the
Right.
playtesting.
Right.
If I'm going to launch next week, I'm going to launch next week. And this guy here coming to say, well, I don't think you're not ready. You're not ready. Well, what do I know? Well, you know what I mean? Like you're not ready to hear that. You're not about
Yeah.
to just park this idea. And then what we see, and
Right.
it does happen every now and again, is the game comes along, it rolls through, and it just tumbleweed comes past.
Yeah.
And it's got nothing to do with the game. But,
Right.
it might do. It could be a brilliant game. It could be a terrible
Sure.
game. It doesn't matter because you haven't set it up to work because part of it you just didn't know. We just assume that Kickstarter is this place that will just bring all this money flooding into passion projects, and it
Yeah.
just doesn't work like that. But it's again a hard conversation, right? Because if you've
Right.
got a designer who's poured thousands of pounds and thousands of hours into a project, and they're going to press go next week, and you're like, don't press go next week. Don't press go next week. But that language doesn't exist because you just come across as the guy who says, don't press go. And so what we try to provide is just an environment where we share ideas and share support and share ideas. And sometimes you might reach out to design and say, oh, your game looks great. Are you sure you're ready? And then ultimately, it's for other indies to decide what they want to do with their games, right?
Yeah.
That's not really
Exactly.
not my place to say in the end.
It's interesting you bring this up because I've been thinking about this. I've been sitting with this for several months now. Is game designers who have not yet pressed go, as it
Mhm.
were. In a lot of ways, how do I, as a podcaster, reach them, right? Because you've been listening to my podcast for some time. I have content creators, I've got first-time publishers, I've got second. I had the CEO of Catan on. We were talking about Catan
Yeah.
earlier. So you get all these different perspectives. And yes, it's true. I talk a lot about community and how do we nurture our community and whatnot, but we're still talking about games. You get designers who talk about their process. You get content creators who talk about what they're looking for in games from the designers. Like, I feel like if John Doe were sitting anywhere in the world designing a game and doesn't
Mhm.
know about playtesting and doesn't know about, prototype or these groups, if they listen to this podcast, they would be like, oh, maybe I'm not ready to push go and I need to find these groups, find your
Mhm.
group. I don't know how to do that, which is to your point, right? Like, we need to do better at
Yeah.
onboarding. Hey, I'm going to plug myself for a minute, tell
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
about
yeah.
Meeple to Meeple, because this is going to be a great way for you to learn as a
Yeah, yeah.
designer, at least the fact that there is because there's a robust community of gamers, designers, publishers, content creators that exists. And it's like, how do you get that word out? How do we get that reach? I think about that a lot lately.
Yeah. I think it also depends a little bit on how those designers experience games as well. Where do they go and play games? Because if you're playing
Right.
games with your family and your friends, then you're not in a big world of games. You're in a small world of games with them. Whereas if you're going to your so the friend I said who was a teacher who'd been kind of like just making tons of games in his spare room, he just popped into the local game shop and had a conversation with Kieran, who owns the shop, and said, I made this game. What do I do with it? And he was able to say, well, come in on a Friday morning. Joe, Jake, and Sam are sat there on a Friday morning messing around with games. Come and join in. And Steve, it's called Steve, he won't mind me saying his name, decided to take the leap and just walk in and bring a game and come and say hi. So I think some of it is about when those people are ready to come in. When either they realize the thing's massive and they actually need some help, like there must be some advice out here. And it's not many Googles till you find playtesting groups and things like that.
That's true.
Um, so there might be a speed limit to it, right? People will come in when they are ready, but ready will look very different for different people. And for some people, ready will mean I'm about to press go on something that's really not going to work very well, and that just happens to be the case. There was no way to catch them. Um, I think it's just difficult when you kind of get that idea. Oh, I can just see how much money and time has just gone into this, and I just want I just want more games in the book. That's all I want. More
Right.
games in the book.
Right. And I want to, with an open heart and as sincere as possible, prevent you, game designer out there in the world. I want you to save that money, save that energy, and reach out to these groups before you're
Mm,
about to push go next week.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's how we get quality games
Mm,
on our
mhm.
shelves so that I can play. We want more games. We want more quality games. Everything you just said. So
And you want more indie
mm,
games as well, because
you
your
do.
indie games where you have really interesting stuff, where people aren't worrying about the rules of what games should look like, or just trying to make something, and that
Yeah.
you get some weird, odd shapes coming out, and like, "Oh, this shape's cool, right?" Because that indie
Right.
space drives that bigger space to be
Exactly.
different and to push those mechanics into new spaces and to let people try stuff.
Absolutely. So, what's one piece of advice you have for you meet that designer, right?
Mhm.
Someone comes to you and is like, Joe, I've got this game, I've got this idea for a game, right? So they're onboarding. Okay. They're not ready to launch next week, but they've got an idea for a game. Maybe they even have a prototype ready to go. Do you have one piece of advice that you're like, this is important?
Comes in two bits. So if you've got an
Okay.
idea for a game, you need the prototype. Don't sit on the idea, make the thing. Put it on paper. Does it actually play? Part two, go and find some play test with other people. Go and find a play test group as quickly as you possibly can. You're going to, what do I say? What would I have said to me if I could go give myself that advice before I went to that first play test?
Yes.
You as a designer are looking for, you're in pursuit of the game that exists there. And sometimes I think of it a little bit like, I suppose, sculpture, that you're digging away at something and somewhere in there is that thing.
Yeah.
And it's unlikely that at any one particular moment you've got the final piece. There's always more digging to do. And I think it's about going in with an open mind, going in ready to adapt and listen to the feedback people are giving you and decide what you're going to do with that. And I think the feedback's a really interesting thing as well, because I think it's important for a designer that you are open to listening to feedback, listening carefully to it. But what you don't want to be doing is bouncing left and right every time someone throws a new idea into your game. And I've done that on previous games, right? That I've
Sure.
sat on the shelves where someone says, add this in. All right, I'll go away and add this in. Add this in. No, add this in. And you end up looking at the thing at the end of it and think, this isn't the thing that I started with.
Yeah.
This isn't the game that I wanted to make. This is some kind of weird hybrid of other people's ideas.
Yeah.
I think you might decide, actually, when you hear that kind of feedback, you say, well, actually, that's lovely, but this is the thing I'm making. It's complicated. It's absolutely. I've got two nice blogs on it, actually. One where I interviewed Steve, the guy who came to that first PlayStation, about what that was like. I'll share it with you after. And then one where I had a chat with another designer called Richard about what the experience of playtesting is like for those playtesters, because it in itself is just a lovely world to explore. Which I'm now going back on stuff we've just talked about, but yeah,
No, that's
the
great.
whole thing is interesting, right? The whole thing's just lovely.
Yeah.
Like games and what they do is just incredible at bringing people together and just poking at little social dynamics and creating these sets of rules that people share. Blah, it's lovely.
Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with me. So tell everyone who's listening where they can find you on the social media, where they can find your game and print a copy.
Yeah, sure. So on social media, I'm Joe at Joe Plays Games with some underscores in there, or at Word Dungeon, and that's on Instagram. Not really anywhere else. Somewhere on Facebook, but I don't know what my password is, so it's technically clear Facebook. And then the Word Dungeon games, they're available online. The next kind of best place to get them is part of an add-on for the BackerKit game that's coming out on May 7th. I should know the date. I'm now not confident it's May 7th, which is a selection of 100 print of these little dungeons. The bigger dungeons will be add-ons from the previous, so you can kind of get them as part of that as well. Or just drop me an email and say, give me a little dungeon to play, and I've got a few kind of demo ones that I can send along to people if they'd like to. I mean, if you sign up to the BackerKit straight away, you get three free little ones that you can have a try. Because for me, it's really important that I make sure you know what it is that you're getting. I don't hide anything. I want you to. This is the game, and if you like it, great. If you don't, that's absolutely fine as well. It doesn't bother me either way. I want you to have a look at it and see what you think and play it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also I think just a little plug for it, I suppose. It's a word game for people who don't really like word games. Which is weird. Like, a lot of people have said, "Oh, I absolutely hate word games, but I like your word game quite a lot." And I think that's because it's just your vocabulary. It's not you not a bunch of tiles, and it's not competitive. I'm not sat kind of trying to be cleverer than you, PJ, at words. I'm just sat at home with a piece of paper, scribbling away, trying to get myself out of a tight corner through a dungeon.
But
yeah,
the challenge is, can you use the word Zephyr and Cloudburst?
Yes. Cloudburst is, for the little dungeons, Cloudburst is actually too long. What's Cloudburst?
Okay. Yeah.
It's 10 words, and the little dungeons are only 9 by 9, so I don't think you'd even fit Cloudburst in. In fact, tomorrow I'll draw up another dungeon to go in the set that will fit the Cloudburst in.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for listening. Please make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And the question for all of you this week, and post in the comments, is what is your favorite word that you could foresee in a word puzzle? As always, be kind to each other, and let's play more games.